3, 2, 1.
We'd like to welcome you to another edition of GrokTALK, brought to you by New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site, GrokTALK.com. We are your feared, extremist, right-wing, hard-charging, gun-toting, opinionated, outspoken, rabble-rousing, letter-writing, radio microphone-stomping conservatives and rational libertarians. So get ready for more news and opinion you could only get from GrokTALK.com.
GrokTALK.
All right, so I was ranting about the New Hampshire House having no gonads, and Skip said I had to continue. But before I do that, I wanted to welcome you to GrokTALK. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening to the podcast. If you are a podcast listener on Stitcher, iTunes, Spreaker, I wrote it down, iHeart, TuneIn, Tumblr, YouTube, Ustream, and even Blip TV. We'd like to remind you, as we always do, that we are on Facebook and Twitter. Please like us, follow us, and share what we produce and put up there, because it spreads the word. And he's getting the stick out. Uh-oh. He said he was going to poke me with the stick if I didn't talk about what I was talking about. Anyway, we had been... Ow! Hey, that's the pointy end. All right. Thank you for the pointy end of your stick. We were talking about WTFs in the pre-show. And are you knighting me now? Oh, okay, that's the soft end. All right. Thank you so much. Okay, we were talking about some interesting bills this week, and I'm going to turn on some microphones because he wanted me to rant. I can't rant if you're talking, right?
Rant on.
Rant on. Rant. Anyway, we were talking about legislation that and the New Hampshire House and HB 357 being converted into a gas tax, and of course Skip and Mike were talking about how we have this governor who's raised the budget by $1 billion in her budget, her proposed budget, and how the media controls the message, and the Republicans are horrible at controlling the message, and how the media is talking about how Republicans want to cut some of this $1 billion expansion. And that's the news. It's this news. And at the same time, they're on the other side. They're trying to raise gas taxes and all this other crap. It's ridiculous.
You know, I look at what the DOT is saying. Well, we have to lay off half our employees. Part of me is saying, well, that's not a bad start. One of the essential things of government is, I think, to take care of the roads. So in some ways, it's not a great deal. But this is a problem that government has caused for government itself. And the guys, you can put it anywhere you want there, Mr. Max. Oh, he makes us look like slobs. You know
nice.
that?
He does.
You know, Mr. Max Abrams. Oh, gosh, it's a Monday morning on Saturday. I'm sorry. Has just joined us, and he's in a nice suit and a striped collared shirt.
And he doesn't have a little mitt on the end of his microphone.
Oh.
You're going to have to go find that.
We'll have to find
Max
one.
will be joining us momentarily, and we also have, from the John Birch Society, Hal Shurtleff calling in to talk about the Constitutional Convention movement that's going on. Thank you, Mike, for bringing us this guest, because we always try to bring guests in. We would have had a few more this week, but we were trying to wrangle a prospective presidential candidate.
This one.
And because we didn't know what segment we were going to get them in, we didn't book anybody else, and of course we didn't book them either, so now we have open segments, and that's okay.
We're working on it.
Because we can fill that time.
And, you bet.
And you never know who might show up. We have the right to know people are having a nice meeting next door. I mean, maybe we can wrangle one of them in here.
Yeah.
So there's always possibilities. There's always going to be more guests. So you got that over there? Okay. We won't videotape that because that's naughty.
Steve.
He's putting a little knit hat on his microphone.
Right. So anyways.
Interesting.
I look at this whole week
Steve,
with the House.
You're slightly out of order. It's a Mickey warmer, not a Willy warmer.
Gosh, how do I follow that? But anyways, it's a case
Just,
of...
keep talking. That's what we...
Here's the NHGOP is now... They didn't learn from last year and the year before that how the base hated this gas tax, where most of us see government has created this problem, and now you're going to sock us with more cost because you guys can't straighten things out. And we're seeing it once again. You know, they hate to hear it, but when they do stupid stuff like this, it does give rise to the meme of there's not a dime's difference between the two parties. If you're going to tax us again, like the Democrats would love to do it, and the Democrats are laughing all over this. They think this is hysterical, that the Republicans are doing their own job. Republicans, at least let them lead on something like this, you fools. If you're going to get... I'm having a meltdown here.
Okay, well, we can move on to something else. Justice.
We can raise all the money we need by having a tax on Chardonnay and Brie.
Touche, Max.
We could always, if we taxed liberal outrage, we'd be rolling in cash, wouldn't we?
Oh, speaking of liberal outrage, we haven't put it up on the camera.
Oh, that's
yet.
right. I brought this back from CPAC for one purpose, and one purpose
yeah,
only,
let's not tax
and that was
brains.
to outrage liberals. Look up there.
Yeah.
Palin on horseback, and the only speculation is whether she's carrying a large gun or a small gun.
I'm not a fan of the whole posters of politicians thing. I don't do that. I think that's creepy. But this will piss off Democrats, and so I'm okay with that.
Well, you know what we do need to do is get Obama in his mom pants on the bicycle and put it up next to Palin. But then again, you also brought back a couple other little thingies too.
I did. We have the Big Government Sucks at biggovernmentsucks.com.
Mac,
we have the LOL thing.
Yeah, Max are gonna. Yeah, hold on just a second. Just let me just get a
couple other things. I actually have a Rand Paul poster around here somewhere somebody handed me.
There we go. Big Government
I'll get it signed
Sucks.
and raffle it off to some Free Stater. Maybe they'll give us a bunch of money for it. We can use it to buy another headset.
Yeah, we are still looking for another headset. We are still grateful to Alvin C. for donating the money. We are very grateful for the new headset. But yeah, we're still looking for another one, and now we have another need for more software. So.
Yeah, well, we have lots of needs. But anyway, we're going to move on because Max is here, and it's his segment, baby. And you can, of course, stay as long as you want because we have a guest at 9:30, but the rest of the show is open. So anyway, hi there.
Hi, it was good to see you guys.
Good to see you.
There was quite a bit that happened over the last month regarding criminal justice. And before I start, the Right to Work bill came up. That was the only hotly disputed bill in the last week before we broke. And I think it was in the last bill on Wednesday or Thursday of last week. So it was special ordered, so it was held off to the very, very end. It was the absolute final vote, and of course, everyone wanted to get home. People were leaving.
It arrived by FedEx, special order? I had to, Max. Sorry.
So,
actually, UPS.
FedEx is non-union, so
UPS.
Everyone was. Of course, the decision of whether or not to work in a union shop or non-union shop is up to the worker. And some people believe even if you're working in a union shop, it should still be up to the worker. So there was this tremendously long debate that dragged on for over half an hour. Everyone wanted to go home. And, of course, came up after Al Baldessaro spoke for about 10 minutes himself. And the vote came to 149 to 146. The committee recommended ought to pass. It's a Republican committee. It passed. Bill O'Brien went up and made the motion to reconsider.
What?
Yep. Bill O'Brien went up to make the motion to reconsider in order to prevent them from bringing the issue back up. So he made the motion ought to pass, or made the motion to reconsider and asked people to vote no. They voted no, mainly because they wanted to get home. This time that passed by about 25 votes. So it's passed through the House. Police and fire are exempt, but it's moving on to the state Senate where they're currently in a deadlock. So one state senator being sick at home or stepping out to use the restroom could result in it passing, but it would just go to the governor's desk. And last time when it went to John Lynch's desk, of course the unions put over $110,000 into his campaign despite the fact that he was not running for re-election. And he then very quickly vetoed it just as the money was coming in.
And retired with the money.
Who knows what happens?
It's in his campaign, so he can donate to other campaigns.
Yeah, well, you just have to see the union money every time there's an election when the giant trucks show up with posters on the sides for their favorite politician of the day.
Well, yesterday I wrote, can we ask some New Hampshire fourth graders to submit the next Right to Work bill?
So it'll lose by 17 votes?
Yeah, no,
I've
that's just the...
I've got a story on that. I don't know if you'll allow me to talk about the
Sure.
Red Tail Hawk bill.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, it made Fox News. It's gone viral nationally.
It's all over the news. I sent out a press release on it last night. I was part of the debate. Now, those kids from the Lincoln Ackerman School are from my district. They come from Hampton Falls. Mm-hmm. And I sat on the bench. There's a picture of me on Facebook that has me sitting on the bench as Representative Burt is ridiculing the bill and the idea. And some of the parents agreed from Hampton Falls. Some of the parents agreed that all these different bills about the state mastodon and spending time on declaring the bobcat to be the state wildcat and so on and so forth. There are 4 different symbolic bills, and they feel that it's a big waste of time and it costs a lot of money to keep the House in session at something like $17,000 a day. But I really felt that the red-tailed hawk making it the state raptor, I thought that was fair. There are states with state raptors. There are all kinds of different state symbols. Unfortunately, as happens, the debate got a little bit silly, and if you've ever seen a floor debate in the State House, there's quite a bit of ridicule. They don't attack fellow representatives. They attack how silly the bill is. And the kids were not upset, from what I saw. They were not upset about the Planned Parenthood comment, but I did see that they were upset, sitting from the bench, looking up in the gallery, seeing the kids up there. And Representative Elena Hearn was with them, former representative, and former Representative Don Gorman was also up in the gallery. And the debate dropped to the level that we're used to seeing. And I got up. I was getting ready to get up to speak, and Jasper calls Representative Groen to come down, and he makes these graphic remarks about a red-tailed hawk ripping his prey limb from limb, and then he makes the Planned Parenthood remark, which I thought was, my impression at the time was that was over the top, and it was completely off topic, and it was completely inappropriate for the State House.
Well, I would have...
You did that, not me.
I know. I would have said I would agree with the kids there because they don't get the Planned Parenthood. They don't understand how some abortions do rip the unborn baby, into pieces before it is brought out. I think that probably should have been left alone. I think it may have been an apt simile for that, but outside of what the bill was for this time around with the kids in the gallery. But this is what happened. You're right. This is what happens, as you said. It descended to the regular House level. This is politics, and I told the most esteemed wife as I was sitting on the couch watching this that this is what happens, and sometimes the kids are going to get crushed. Not all bills make it through, no matter how little the kids are. They're trying to do this. I'm sorry. It happens.
There was a Democrat who got up and spoke. There were Democrats and Republicans on both sides of this debate. Bipartisan opposition and bipartisan support. It passed the committee, but it only passed 10-8. So when it comes close like that, people tend to not follow the committee recommendation. So the committee only pulled about 133 votes, and there were 160 votes against. And the Democrat representatives were just as demeaning as Groen was. But it was actually Representative Burt's comments. They were very much on. He was very much on his game, but he was reverting to the, ridicule the bill approach. And it wasn't so much the words that he said, but the way that he said it. I was sitting there. Now, here's the picture. The photo on Facebook is me sitting there looking up at these kids, gauging their reaction, and how difficult it must have been for them. They worked for almost a year on this. They spent a tremendous amount of time. They went to the hearings. They had to schedule the field trips, take days off, one for the hearing, one for the, and a lot of them took recess off and did the research and found out what RSAs are. And now they're up there watching this 20-minute floor debate, and they're watching their bill get torn apart limb from limb by these representatives.
Give them $100 in a parking space.
They were much classier. I'll give them credit. The kids were much classier than any of the representatives. Now, I got up and spoke, and my arguments had already been taken. I came up with a paper just like this, and I came up with my bullet points, and I was ready to just give a kind of canned floor speech in favor of it. But when your arguments in favor have already been used, it's considered poor taste it's considered not to be appropriate to go up and repeat someone else's arguments. So I had to go up and argue that the raptor is completely different from birds like the purple finch, which is our state bird. And so I kind of made a logical case for we have a right, we have the right to have a state raptor. And for 4 or 5 or 6 days, that was the end of it. There were parents in my district complaining about it rightly, about the quality of the debate and how their bill was being demeaned. But it wasn't picked up until probably about 5 days after that. And Representative Groen's been asked a number of times for apologies. His phone mailbox, I tried to call him, is full. I've tried to email him. Other people have tried to email him, and he's been on the news media a number of times, and people are trying to get a hold of him, and they're not able to. So it's amazing that this story's gone viral, but it wasn't even the quality of the debate or the fact that their bill was demeaned. The kids were upset about that aspect. The parents were upset about that aspect. It was the Planned Parenthood remark that has people really incensed. But that's the floor debate in the State House.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll say I think it was an apt analogy, and I think the only problem I have with Warren saying it is, sometimes you do have to, with kids involved, you have to kind of watch it a little bit.
Well, aren't there kids there all the time? I mean, don't people bring classfuls of kids all the time there? I mean, that doesn't temper anybody's disposition by any means.
But it was their bill, so
I don't care about that specifically. I think it would have been nice if they saw the process, and it would have been nice if they had won their bill.
Right.
I think it would have, and I don't know. I don't. This is politics. I mean, we don't candy coat it by any stretch, and it's unfortunate that that's the way it rolled out. But that's what happens there. If you want to see how politics works, that's how it works.
Well, my main concern, though, or my main beef with this whole deal, is just like that bill that would have cut off cell phones in a moving vehicle faster than 5 miles an hour. Mm-hmm. At some point, you got to say this is stupid. That. Once again, we see politicians not willing to do the hard work of really going after the real high priorities in the appropriate time. And I would have judged this bill to have been very low priority compared to everything else that the state's looking at.
I would have put the Raptor bill way ahead of that. I mean, way ahead of it.
Way ahead of what?
Way ahead of the cell phone bill.
Well, yeah, but in the grand scheme of things,
yeah, sure.
Yep, it's still way down.
Way down. But I mean,
the problem is that the Raptor bill is just a time waste, feel good thing that we could do without.
Yeah.
The cell phone bill is far worse than that. It's a low priority from the citizens' point of view, meaning we don't want it. The problem is that the politicians, or some of them, do want it, and that's a big deal, and it has to be fought tooth and nail.
It's also very intrusive. Well, the Raptor bill doesn't do anything. It makes a bird, a state raptor. However you say that the right way. The other bill, I mean, and that doesn't intrude on you at all. If you happen to be driving, you're like, oh, state raptor, big deal, right? Doesn't affect your life at all.
Unless you drive off the road looking at the state raptor.
Well, that's possible, but the station.
Hey, Mike, you need to move
cell
over
phone
just a
bill
little
is very intrusive. They all are, actually.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Well, yeah, but again, it's put the damn phone down and drive, not have the nanny state try to disable your passenger's cell phone so you can't navigate.
And I would say that if I was going to go after Warren for his comment, it would be regardless of whether or not the students were there.
You have to understand the story behind the story. Warren had been working on his own bill, an abortion bill, all year long, and he put a tremendous amount of time into this, and the Judiciary Committee, which is not even pro-choice, they're pro-abortion. They are the worst. There are only maybe 2 pro-life members and maybe 1 or 2 pro-choice members. The rest of them are very hardcore pro-abortion. Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter. They're very pro-abortion. They're for pushing abortion. They took his bill and they amended it, but they amended it in such a way that they would have made the law even worse to encourage or allow abortions even into the abortion process. And so his bill that was so important to him had just been torn apart limb from limb itself. Yes, it was.
By a raptor. Perfect.
By a raptor.
And so the compromise...
Turn around and do that again for the camera.
The compromise that had to be worked out was that it had to be tabled. And so his bill, as amended by the Judiciary Committee, is tabled. And it is, in its amended form, it is worse than the current law.
Great.
Well, it does happen, doesn't it?
So,
and I can see why, but I mean, he shouldn't take that out on anybody else.
I know, but there was no floor debate for him
Right.
on his bill. So, what's actually gone through? Another bill that was tabled was an important one, House Bill 263, which would have prohibited residency restrictions on sex offenders. Now, this passed the Criminal Justice Committee 17-0, and the law enforcement lobby actually showed up and testified in favor of it. And what they were concerned that this is Representative Robertson's bill. I was asked to co-sponsor it, but I didn't. The concern was that a lot of convicted sex offenders, when they come out, they're kind of going underground, and that they're losing them. They want to know, the police want to know where they are. So even though it's, on one hand, it's once you've paid your debt to society, it's your right to live wherever. But at the same time, it was a public safety issue, and there was a concern that we don't know where they are. Now, Republicans still raised a concern, and the reason that Jim Webb stood up and tabled this, and the reason the House voted to table the bill, is there's a concern that a town wouldn't even have the ability to set up residency restrictions like right across the street from a school or daycare. And so that bill was tabled. They didn't want the debate. They didn't want the roll call. So they killed the bill. I believe Representative Hull had a bill to there were actually a couple of bills that went through relating to military and historical reenactments. Representative Welch, who's vice chair of criminal justice, and Thole, who's chairman of criminal justice, put this bill forward to require that people who are doing a reenactment contact not only the police chief of the town but also the fire chief, so that if there's a reenactment going on, every once in a great while people hear muskets going off and they think it's a drive-by musket shooting or some kind of parade, and people do the 21 gun salute and they think it's the crime going off. And so as soon as there are gunshots heard in New Hampshire, even if there's a firing range nearby, even if it's coming from the firing range, shooting range area, or someone's hunting or who knows what, if it's in the compact part of a town, which is 6 contiguous houses with 300 yards apart, any suburban area really, or even bedroom towns like Deerfield, people hear gunshots going off, they panic, they come from another state, they call the police, and the police have to send somebody out. And because of
I hear gunfire by my house all the time.
Yeah, me too.
Because there's some woods and then another neighborhood and then nothing, and people go out there and shoot because they can. And every day during the summer, sometimes at night, I always hear gunfire. I'm just like, oh, shoot, somebody's shooting.
Yeah, and out my way, I hear shotgun blasts all the time because there's, especially in duck season or deer season, we're not that tightly built up in Hollis, and there are areas of woodland where they can go hunting.
In Seabrook, where I live, we've got 12 acres of wooded land behind my property. We have 2 different gun ranges in town. We have a very big gun culture, and then on the other side of the border there in Massachusetts, I'm on the border with Massachusetts, you have North Shore, Massachusetts, which has a high crime rate because the private citizens are disarmed. Only the criminals can get guns. So, you hear gunfire from the New Hampshire side, it's a law-abiding citizen. You hear gunfire. People, did that come from south or north? I kind of sounded like it was coming from east. So were those criminals shooting off guns, holding up a liquor store or something? You never know. You're looking at the clock. Was that the good guys or the bad guys this time?
I like that analogy. Gunfire in New Hampshire, legal. Gunfire from Massachusetts, criminals.
Right. Well, but the criminals down there don't care. So a lot of the gangs and a lot of criminals and career criminals, especially with property crime, they there's a ring of crime. They come right up to the border, and then they come right in within about walking distance. And since I live right on the border, towns like Seabrook have a lot of crime because the criminals take advantage of the border, and because firearms are effectively illegal in Massachusetts, they have a very, very high crime rate. Now, my bill, relative to the definition of deadly force, this was a very serious issue, and of course Representative Burt and Chairman Thole got up and they wheeled out the tired old ridicule tactic again, and they attacked my bill in the same way that on the same day, by the way, only a couple of hours after, the red tail hawk bill, some of the same people. Representative Burt did the same thing to my bill that he did to the red tail hawk bill. But Chairman Thole got up and he said something that was kind of ludicrous. He said that if my deadly force bill had passed, now this bill that I've worked hard on for many, many months was torn apart limb from limb like so many others. But it's designed to deal with a problem in the law where people hesitate and where under our self-defense law you have to get stabbed, you have to get shot, you have to get raped, you have to get run over, you have to get pushed out of a window or cut up before you can do anything, because you have to have physical evidence that you've been severely injured or mortally wounded before you can prove that you have the right to deadly force. So this bill was designed to kind of partially deal with that problem. And ironically, Chairman Thole got up and he lied to the entire State House. And he said that if this bill passed, you'd have to get shot before you could do anything. And apparently that's what was told to them in committee. Well, you can look at RSA 627 and you can see for yourself that under the current law, the only way to get evidence proving that you have the right to act in self-defense is to get stabbed or shot first.
Yeah, and that's kind of what the progressives would like, that you have to show real harm before you can defend yourself, which is ludicrous. Absolutely ludicrous.
Defense means preventing harm.
Well,
yeah, so it's time for a new phrase, guys. When seconds count, doctors are only hours away to testify about your injury.
Or mortuaries.
Mortuaries. No, you've got plenty of time to get there. Yes, we do. All right, are you going to stick around, or do you have to be somewhere?
I'll stick around.
Okay, because we have a guest for the next segment, Hal Shurtleff. You got the number right there. Give him a call. And this is GrokTALK. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
When asked whether she still supports Obamacare, Senator Jeanne Shaheen said,
"Yes, I do continue to support the law. We're beginning to see some positive results."
How can Senator Shaheen say we're seeing positive results when 22,000 of our neighbors have already lost their health insurance? What's worse, the Boston Globe reports the state's only health insurance provider radically reduced the number of hospitals in their network, forcing some people to drive over an hour for lab work, even when there's a hospital within a few miles of their home. When pressed about lack of access, Shaheen said,
"There are some hospitals that are not covered, unfortunately, and I certainly hope that's going to change."
Jeanne Shaheen promised us we could keep our doctors and our health care coverage. Now she hopes we can get to a local hospital? Call Senator Shaheen at 603-647-7500. Tell her we need more than hope. We need leadership. Paid for by Citizens for a Strong New Hampshire.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested, riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW, New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at GerardAtLarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
This is the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is the repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning. You're listening to GrokTALK.
3, 2, 1.
We'd like to welcome you to another edition of GrokTALK, brought to you by New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site, GraniteGrok.com. We are your feared extremist, right-wing, hard-charging, gun-toting, opinionated, outspoken, rabble-rousing, letter-writing, radio microphone stomping conservatives and rational libertarians. So get ready for more news and opinion you could only get from GraniteGrok.com.
GrokTALK.
Welcome back to segment 2 of GrokTALK, brought to you by GraniteGrok.com and the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. Don't forget you can check out this and past programs on Stitcher, iTunes, Spreaker, iHeart, TuneIn, Tumblr, YouTube, Ustream, Blip TV, and of course, GraniteGrok.com. We'd like to remind you also to check us out on Facebook and Twitter. Just look for Granite Grok. And don't forget you can donate to this program. We don't earn any money doing this. We do it for free, and you help support the cost of running the show, the phones, and all that good stuff. And we're happy to take your money to help pay for that. We don't get paid to do any of this. It all goes to equipment and software and monthly recurring bills. So
correct. And I'll read part of a sentence and we'll bring it up later, or talk about it as to who said it. The spine of a worm, the ethics of whores, and the integrity of pirates. This is somebody that talked about the GOP.
You don't have a headset on. Why are you talking? My God.
Okay, now give me how accurate. And what I was going to say last time you cut me off, which plays right into this, is that you're playing music over me again. Is that elephants never forget? What they never forget is they're afraid of mice.
All right, well, let's enough of that pithy banter stuff. Let's bring our guest on. Hal Shurtleff is the, I lost my note, Regional Field Director at the John Birch Society. Mr. Shurtleff, welcome to the program.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Great to have you here. Are you in New England?
Actually, right now, I'm at a homeschool show in Rockland, Maine. The Maine Homeschool is a Maine annual conference, so having an information table here, and my relief didn't show up, my 10-year-old daughter, so I have to walk away from the table where it's a little quiet. But I'm ready to go. So.
All right, thanks for being on the show. So, Mike,
Sure.
You booked this guest. Let's turn it over to you.
Well, so the John Birch Society is a very conservative organization and strict constitutionalists, and they have long had a fear of managing to make the mess worse by attempting to modify the Constitution. And so, whenever there's a debate about a constitutional convention, you can count on the John Birch Society to make very cogent arguments as to why not. And it is, especially since that is a hot topic right now, with a lot of people, proposing various bills in various states to get us to a CONCON. I thought it was a highly appropriate time to have Hal provide the counter argument, and yes, we'll try and get one of our legislators on for the other side sometime soon. I believe Josh Moore is one of the pros. Hal, take it.
Well, thanks for having me on. And yes, in Article 5, I'm sure some of your listeners may not know the whole aspect of the Article 5. Article 5 of the Constitution, 2 means to amend the Constitution. 1, of course, is the process where 2/3 of the U.S. House and Senate propose an amendment. It goes to the states. 3/4 of the states either say, no, you need 3/4 of the states to ratify it, or the second way is through something that we've never had, what they call a convention. It's been referred to as a constitutional convention for the past 40 years, but the last couple of years when an organization called Convention of States formed, now they call it a Convention of States. So whatever you call it, it's an Article 5 convention. And the folks on the other side, the conservatives, so there's people on both sides of the spectrum that have always opposed and supported. So it's not your typical left-right issue. There are people, but lately it's mainly people on the left and right pushing one. There's a little bit of token opposition from a couple of left-wing groups opposing it, but it's pretty much groups like the John Birch Society, Eagle Forum, and a few other groups that have popped up, and even Campaign for Liberty's come out against it. Gun Owners of America with Larry Pratt come out against it, many, many others. So the bottom line is you cannot control a convention. Once the convention is called, anything is on the table. That whole Constitution is on the chopping block, so to speak. The resolutions that may be introduced in different states may call for something specific, a balanced budget. The Convention of States, their resolution is rather open-ended when you read it. The Wolf Pack, which is the left-wing group pushing in Article 5, their call is open-ended. They're trying to get an amendment that would curtail parts of the First Amendment dealing with corporations, and then many other things as well. So once a convention is called, again, there is the Constitution is on the chopping block. Now, we are told that 3/4 of the states, actually, in order to ratify, you need 3/4 of the states. either state legislators or, as Congress may decide, ratifying committees. So a lot of these legislators think that they'll pass a resolution, and if there's any amendments that we think are a little off the wall or unsound, there's no way that 3/4 of the states will ever pass them. So we have nothing to worry about. Well, states have done a lot of bad things. They passed bad amendments without a convention. They passed the 16th. They passed the 17th. They passed the 18th. They had to repeal the 18th with the 21st. And also, states have done some strange things as well without the help of an Article 5. Look at your Common Core. Now, the state legislators didn't vote for Common Core, but we're stuck with it in 46 states. And even these so-called red states, they're having a lot of trouble getting rid of it because a lot of these Republicans that are supposed to be conservative and all that are not getting rid of it. We have something called Agenda 21. And New Hampshire's up to its eyeballs in Agenda 21 through HUD and through the regional planning commissions. It was 2010, I think, that the New Hampshire House passed a bill against it. It died in the Senate. So here are some things that have been done without some bad, unsound things. Then you ask the question, well, what exactly is a bad amendment? Because, you and I, we might say, well, there are certain things that we know are bad, but that's a subjective term. And these folks are working awfully hard. I mean, I've never seen it's too bad these people who call themselves conservatives can't get excited about some of these other burning issues, but they're working hard. They think their amendments will pass. The Wolfpack, the left-wing group, they're convinced that their agenda will pass. They wouldn't be spending so much money and time and effort if they thought that they would not get their amendments passed. So in New Hampshire had a number of calls for various reasons for an Article 5. The last time was mid-'80s, had one for a balanced budget amendment. Now you say, why would you be against a balanced budget amendment? I mean, come on, you're conservative. Well, look at the bigger picture. Look at the fine print. A balanced budget amendment doesn't call for a constitutional budget. And the only way to get a balanced budget is to cut the size of government. And it's almost hypocritical that a lot of these state legislators that say, we want to get our power back from the federal government, are more than happy to take billions of dollars or billions of dollars from that same federal government. In fact, what was it, in December? They passed a discretionary bill to the tune of $1 trillion, $1.5 trillion, and your delegation voted for it, right? And I didn't see any resolution coming down from the New Hampshire House that urging their delegates to oppose this. You see, so these people seem to like big government. So how can you have a balanced budget without cutting the size of government? The only other option is to raise taxes. In fact,
and that's exactly why I personally object to a balanced budget amendment of any type, because unless it's very, very specific that it shall be achieved by cuts, not by additional spending, except for wartime, maybe. There's no reason. There's no reason to have an amendment which basically forces you to go and load your profligacy on the backs of the taxpayers.
And another thing too is not just higher, but a VAT tax. That's something that's discussed. So, and because we have a Federal Reserve Bank that just prints money as it's needed, your balanced budget amendment won't address that. And it's funny, they'll tell us that Congress is so horrible and corrupt, but they expect the same corrupt, horrible people to do the right thing when this balanced budget amendment gets passed, which to me is kind of like a little unsound here. So in New Hampshire, let me give you sort of what's happening in New Hampshire. So 2010, after 20 years of efforts, our organization and a few others were able to get all of New Hampshire's calls rescinded. So it was a clean slate. There were no calls. 2012, we beat back a couple of attempts. Jordan Ullery was the man pushing this mainly through a group called ALEC, American Legislative Exchange Council, which is I use the term conservative in quotation marks, but it's a group that it's sort of a legislation machine. It's a nationwide lobbyist group. They've got about 2,000 elected officials, state level, that belong. And they've done some sound things over the years, but they've done some unsound things, including being a big supporter of an Article 5 convention. They like the idea of Obama's free trade agenda, too, and some other things that are not so good. Anyway, Jordan was able to get it through after we beat it back a couple of times, a call in 2012. So right now there is one live call for an Article 5 convention. Last year, the Wolfpack, this is the group that was started by the man who created the Young Turks, Cenk Uygur, a so-called progressive. And the Young Turks, by the way, is part of George Soros' media consortium. So we don't suggest that the Wolfpack is getting money directly from George Soros, but the man who founded the group is getting money from George Soros. Well, Timothy Smith from Manchester submitted the resolution, and we testified against it and it was shot down by a Democrat majority. But they just tabled it. They want nothing to do with it. It expedient to legislate at the committee hearings, and at the it was tabled and they didn't go to a full vote. It was passed a few weeks ago by a Republican majority. 84 Republicans voted for this thing, something that was rejected last year. Pretty much the same resolution. So there's some kind of bipolarism going on at the State House. It's kind of it's called HCR2. It hasn't passed the Senate yet. They haven't held hearings on that, and we're waiting, to get the dates if they are going to hear it.
Right. So Hal, as it happens, we have Max Abramson with us, who's on the get me straight here, legislative affairs.
No, Jasper still has not assigned me to a committee yet.
But you're in the House and you've got first-hand knowledge of some of the proponents, I would guess.
Right. Well, both Republicans and Democrats are split on I think there are 5, HCR 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are all calling for different types of constitutional conventions, and HCR 1 rescinds all calls for a constitutional convention, which didn't pass.
No, they killed that. And in fact, the committee, the write-up the committee gave was not based on right information. I saw the committee report, and they said there's no need to pass this because we haven't had a call since 1988. Well, they had a call in 2012. So I'm wondering if a lot of people who read the report, voted against it based on, this inaccurate information.
Unfortunately, most of our state reps are not even following the committee's recommendations anymore. They're following whatever leadership tells them to do. They might be following the gold standard, which is a constitutional liberty-leaning group called NHLA. They might be following the business group's recommendations, but there are only about 80 to 100 state representatives who are even following the committee's recommendations. Out of 400 reps, I don't think very many are following committee recommendations anymore.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, the word we have is that the speaker doesn't like resolutions, and in general, resolutions aren't too looked upon. But this is a unique situation. This isn't just a resolution honoring, some long New Hampshire resident, but it's a resolution that has teeth. Most resolutions don't have teeth. It expresses a sense of the House or the Senate, but this one has teeth.
Well, Hal, we're going to take a 60-second break, and just before we go, I'm going to say the Republican Speaker of the House doesn't care much for Republicans, actually. So,
I know that. I know that.
which is why the real Republican leadership is trying very hard to hold together a more conservative caucus.
Okay, hang on a second. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. We're going to play a little music once I press the right buttons, and we'll be back after this.
This is the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is the repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested, riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW, New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at GerardAtLarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
All right, we are back. This is GrokTALK. I'm Steve McDonald here with Skip Murphy. Mike Rogers, Max Abramson is in the room, and our guest is Hal Shurtleff from the John Birch Society. You wanted to make a comment there, Matt?
I brought this up in front of Legislative Affairs, in front of, actually, I think 2 or 3 different committees so far. it doesn't matter whether you have an Article 5 convention or not. Congress can bypass that convention, and they can bypass the state legislatures. There's a provision in Article 5 where they can just recommend something and send it on down. Now, what they did with the 21st Amendment was they didn't go to the state legislatures at all. They chose to bypass them, and they used state ratifying conventions. So this whole discussion about whether or not to have a national Article 5 convention, I think, is almost a moot point because they don't need us. They don't need the legislatures. They can go right past us. They can call state ratifying conventions, and without legislation, they can just say, well, you get three statewide elected delegates, and they can pass anything they want.
What do you think?
That's possible. Not only that, but Congress, right now there are no laws governing an Article 5 convention. There's been attempts over the years. I'm talking about the federal level, and even at state levels. But there's been attempts. The last attempt, I think, was in 1979, where Orrin Hatch had hearings, and I've got the 1,300-page report. And the bills that they submitted were passed in the Senate but didn't go to the House. At that point, we were about 2 states away from a convention. So they were obviously, hey, we need some guidelines here. We don't know we don't have no guidelines currently. And one of the there's been 41 bills that have been introduced over the years that would that any amendments coming out of convention would be a 7 years to pass. Like they did with the Equal Rights Amendment and I think a few others. Also, though, they're advocating that the members, the delegates to the convention would be based on electoral college votes. So I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's a good chance. The Wolfpack people advocate democracy. So that means New Hampshire will get 4 delegates, California gets 52 or 53, and so forth. So the small states, the large states with small populations, will have very little voice at this if they decide to do it that way. And according to Judge Bork and others, and Judge Bork was a pretty top legal mind in the country in his time. He said that even if they pass laws, a convention can overrule them, and he said, how would they be able to enforce these laws? So that's just so much uncharted water. Uncharted territory here when it comes to an Article 5. And yes, we understand that it is part of the Constitution, but we also have to realize that our founders did not want the amending process to be easy. Could you imagine if they made it a simple majority? There would be 100 amendments, and we would have amended our Constitution out of existence. So they made it a difficult thing, and they didn't say that states had to use it. They said this was a means they may use. And they expected debate. They didn't say that we should have one every 5 years or every 10 years, or whenever we thought that things were getting out of hand. But we do have other things at our disposal. We have the 10th Amendment, and how do you enforce the 10th Amendment? It's got to be done by the states. Thomas Jefferson, he said nullification is the right remedy. So, and New Hampshire nullified the Real ID Act. In fact, I think they said They provided leadership for the rest of the country in a number of states that said, hey, we're not complying with it. Some states have, but some states haven't. They nullified the fugitive slave laws back in the 1850s and such. And there's probably been other examples. I can't think of any off the top of my head. So that's something that will, I think, the right remedy. And they say that the elections are a waste of time. But we've tried to get the right people in Congress. Well, I think that if we didn't do what we've done, things would be a heck of a lot worse. There are some good people in Congress, that there are some bad people, there's some good people doing bad things, but how can we not get involved with that process? And if we expect people to uphold amendments, either new ones or old ones, for the Constitution, we better do our best to get people down there that are sound and hold them accountable. And that's the sad thing is once they get elected, we don't seem to hold them accountable. And I would say that the state house, the state legislators should be instructing them how to vote. Now they don't have to vote according to what the legislator does, but they should be paying a bigger hand. For years when this issue, very few people cared about this issue up to a couple of years ago. I mean, there was a small group passionate in one way or the other, But most people were indifferent to this thing. And a lot of them have waken up, and they say, good. And they say, well, this is the only solution we have. Well, it's not the only solution. And I contend that the solution would be no solution. It would be worse.
So we passed a bill called HB 148, which in theory would have restricted the powers of delegates and what they could and couldn't vote for. Again, one of the issues that I brought up in committee was once New Hampshire's jurisdiction only deals with where your feet are. As long as your feet are on New Hampshire soil, the state legislature has jurisdiction. As soon as you go to Chicago or San Francisco or Washington, D.C. or wherever they're going to have the national convention, we have no jurisdiction. So whatever statutes have been put in place under HB 148 would have no enforcement. And even if these delegates came back having completely broken their oaths, we'd have, unless you could go after them on perjury charges, you'd have absolutely no enforcement whatsoever. They were talking about taking the occupational licenses if they violated their oath of office.
Well, yes, I know that was a way. No, that was that voted on at the. It went through committee, but was that voted on at the General Assembly?
I can't remember. It was one of the first votes that we had. I can't remember if they tabled it or not.
Dan Itza and my good friend Paul and Bretson, although Paul is against an Article 5, but I think that thing is dead on arrival. You're correct. How can you enforce something, a crime that's committed outside of the state? And then what happens if they give they give themselves immunity? And Article 6 of the Constitution says the highest law of the land, so that can be nullified. That can be just overturned very easily. And so we think, well, we've got a safeguard here. Not only that, but all 50 states have to have something similar, right? Because New Hampshire passes it, so our delegates do what they're supposed to. And some people think that they call this a convention of the states, but it's really a convention of the people because the delegates don't represent the state houses. They don't. They represent the state of New Hampshire, the people of New Hampshire, not the legislatures of New Hampshire. So that's another take on it. In fact, there's been numerous state conventions over the years, and there was an interesting book that came out, I think, in the early 1900s that talked about some of the problems that these conventions had. And there was one, New York State had a convention in 1802, I think, and one of the delegates basically said, we are the people. We are the sovereign people in New York. And they had a lot of power, you see. So it's not that these delegates are going to go down and do one thing or two things or three things, or we're just going to submit a balanced budget. It's a deliberative body. Even Rob Nadelson had wrote that it's a deliberative body. So they get down there. Yeah, maybe the state legislature says we want to have this amendment or that amendment, but we're not bound by that.
Sorry, I wrote early on about this. I said the minute you appoint and or elect these people, they are politicians and should be treated like politicians. They can be bought, they will be sold, things will go bad.
And they're also lame duck too. At least when it comes to being delegates, because once it's over, it's over.
That's right.
Here's another problem. If we have these people get elected as delegates to the national Article 5 convention, do they then come back to our states and suddenly become delegates to our state ratifying conventions?
Well, that's true. That could happen. That could happen.
Is there going to be an election process? Is there going to be a way for the American people to look at some terrible Death Star amendment that comes down? Is there going to be an intervening election where we elect members of our state ratifying convention, or are you just going to have the same group of people who are at the Article 5 national convention coming back and saying, yes, this is what we agreed on, this is what you're getting, with no intervening vote?
Isn't D.C. the Death Star already, even without Darth Vader as vice president?
That is true.
Well, Congress right now could come up with an amendment saying, well, we're oligarchs for life and we're nobility, and they could amend the Constitution and they could choose to bypass the state legislatures, and they could simply have state ratifying conventions just like they did with the 21st Amendment, and as I've said, bypass the state legislatures and just effectively go 3 delegates per state. Those would be $1 million campaigns. They'd have enough states to ratify whatever they wanted, so they wouldn't even need an Article 5 convention.
So, Hal, where do you think? How do you think this is going to go?
Well, I don't know. It's hard to say. We look around the country and we're looking at states that they're passing in some committees, getting shot down in others. So it's really. We may be about 8 states away from one. although Congress may not acknowledge any calls over 7 years. Like, there was a study from the Congressional Research Services in April of last year. You can find it online, Congressional Research Services Article 5 Convention. And that's what one of the things and it was, the guy who wrote it, I don't think it was a question of being biased. He was just the pros and cons. But he said that Congress always believes it has a lot of control over one. And then that's some of the things it pointed out, that any amendment, any resolution that's not worded identically. In fact, the New Hampshire resolution for an Article 5 convention passed in 2012 is worded differently from many others. And there's a lot of these resolutions that go back to the 70s and 80s. So it's hard to say. So I think they're doing some kind of count. I've been reading about that, trying to get their handle on what calls are valid. And a lot of states had rescinded their calls, and so those old calls may not be valid anyway. So, but I'm acting as if we're 8 states away. I think that's the safe thing to think. Just we're 8 states away from one, and we have to be as diligent as we can. If any of your listeners are interested in helping us out or learning more about the subject, jbs.org is the website. In New Hampshire, we have a Facebook, New Hampshire Friends of the John Birch Society. We also have a Facebook page called Stop the Constitutional Convention, where we have a lot of updated information from around the country.
And you specifically have a paper refuting Mark Levin's call for his Liberty amendments.
Yes, we have a lot. We just wrote one recently, an article recently, what the battle going on in Texas. Yeah, we have an article, it was about 4-6 pages, Levin's risky proposal that was published sort of in the wake of his book. His book was published summer of 2012. So if you go to thenewamerican.com and just put in Article 5 Convention, you'll find some going back to the 80s, some articles on the subject. Probably more information than you need to know on the subject, but lots of good information there. And I know, in fact, I'm at the Homeschool Show, and there's a gentleman who's a wonderful guy, Bill Clark. He ran for Congress, he ran for the Senate, ran for governor, and he's in favor of one. But we had a very good conversation, and we shook hands, and we have the highest regard for each other. Unfortunately, that's not with a lot of folks. There's been a lot of nastiness going on, and it's a sad thing because there are a lot of these folks that when I learn who they are, I say, gee, I agree with everything you stand for except for this, you know. But I think people can have strong views and disagree without hating each other, without resorting to mudslinging.
All right. Well, Hal, we're out of time. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, and good luck.
For having me on.
All right. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye. All right. We're coming up next with, I believe, Betsy McCaughey. Is that correct? All right. So stay tuned. We're going to have a chat with her. Haven't had her on for a while. Good to have her back. This is GrokTALK.
Senator Jeanne Shaheen said, if you like your current health plan, you can keep it. That's not true, Senator. 22,000 New Hampshire citizens have been kicked off their insurance plans. Hospitals in Rochester, Concord, and Portsmouth, they aren't allowed to provide care under the exchange. Senator, you were wrong in your comments. You should apologize for your misleading remarks. I'm calling Senator Shaheen at 750-3004 and telling her I want my doctor back. You should too.
Paid for by saberpac.org, not authorized by any candidate or candidate committee.
We are struggling. Rising healthcare costs are part of the problem. Senator Jeanne Shaheen helped create this mess we're in. As a state senator, her bill chased 21 insurers out of our state. It reduced our choices, raised prices for New Hampshire families, and when Jeanne Shaheen supported Obamacare, it limited access to 10 of our 26 hospitals, reducing our choices again. Tell Jeanne Shaheen she's made healthcare worse. Few things are as important as finding the right doctor. And under Obamacare, that's harder than ever. Over a third of our hospitals no longer available. Our doctors no longer covered. Fewer choices, longer drives. No state has been harder hit than us. And even after watching it impact New Hampshire, Congresswoman Ann Custer still supports it. Call Ann Custer. Tell her Obamacare isn't working for New Hampshire.
This is the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is the repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now, at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Three, two, one.
We'd like to welcome you to another edition of GrokTALK, brought to you by New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site, GrokTALK.com. We are your feared, extremist, right-wing, hard-charging, gun-toting, opinionated, outspoken, rabble-rousing, letter-writing, radio, microphone stomping conservatives and rational libertarians. So get ready for more news and opinion you could only get from GraniteGrok.com.
GrokTALK.
Welcome back to Segment 3. This is GrokTALK, brought to you by GraniteGrok.com and the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. Please take a few minutes to donate at GraniteGrok.com to support the program and the costs of operating this cute little quaint programming thingy that we got going on here. This is show 91, by the way, for those of you keeping score at home. We've been at it for a little while. Show number 100 is coming up pretty soon. We're going to try to plan something special. I don't know what we're going to do, but it's coming 9 weeks from now, and hopefully, maybe we'll get all the presidential candidates out.
Does that also include the previous incarnations?
No, absolutely not.
No, this is show 91.
I don't count those.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was a strange experiment on a mountain, and it didn't work out. And
oh, it worked very well until I couldn't keep up.
No, well, that's just it. So you have your show in the middle of nowhere, and we couldn't get to the middle of nowhere, so you had to do it by yourself, which was very frustrating.
Anyway, so it's the 91st edition of Steve Talk with Skip and Mike.
Steve Talk with Skip and Mike. I actually do the least amount of talking of everybody in the room. So it's really not Steve Talk. It's GrokTALK, and we're going to have some more GrokTALK because we have a new surprise guest that we didn't originally have scheduled. Dr. Betsy McCaughey is with us. Good morning.
How are you? I'm always glad to join your program. Real straight talkers.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I believe we were going to talk about King v. Burwell. Is that what you were told?
Yes, and I'm excited to give you an update. I was just on a conference call with Congressman Paul Ryan, and here is the latest. First of all, disregard all those shrieking mainstream media predictions that if the 9 justices or a majority of them strike down the current administration's implementation of Obamacare, that many, many millions of people will suffer. In fact, people will be far better off than they are now. And the Republicans in Congress have gotten their act together. They have devised what they call the exit ramp strategy from Obamacare so that there won't be a lot of disruption and people won't find themselves suddenly uninsured. And they have this plan which they are now putting into bill form. It will be scored by the Congressional Budget Office for cost and introduced into Congress before the Supreme Court announces its decision in this case at the end of June. So if, as many people predict, and we all hope, if the challengers to the current administration win, then the Congress will right away pass that bill and put it on the President's desk, and it will ensure a smooth transition out of Obamacare into freedom and lower-cost health insurance.
And therefore put the president on the spot by having to sign it.
That's right.
You know, one of the things, Betsy, that I just find so ironic that in looking at some of the transcripts of the oral arguments in front, we saw the liberals like Kagan and all the folks on that side say, oh, well, this would be a bad thing. Look at all the millions of people that will be hurt versus the conservatives looking at the actual verbiage of the law. And I keep thinking, isn't that what at the very least, what the Supremes are supposed to be looking at? Not the externalities of bad legislation, but just the fact, what does that legislation actually say in black and white? Because that's really what this whole case is about.
And that's what this case is about. The Obama administration defied the actual text of the law and the will of the American people and provided subsidies in all 50 states, even though the letter of the law says those taxpayer-funded subsidies can only be handed out in the 14 states that actually set up their own exchanges. So, that being said, of course the job of the Supreme Court is to implement the laws written, to insist that the president do that. But the left is quite right that the justices have in the past, on occasion, been sensitive to the practical outcomes of their decisions, and so they have exaggerated, distorted, just plain lied about what the outcome would be. In fact, although 6 to 8 million people would not be able to get their taxpayer-funded subsidy from Obamacare, under the plan that the Republicans have devised, they would get a tax credit for a particular period of time until the new plans are available. And the fact is that a year from that decision, here is what you would actually see in America. You would see 37 states in which people are free to choose what kind of health insurance they want to buy. It doesn't have to be the one-size-fits-all government-designed package. They're free to have health insurance or not to have health insurance. The employer mandate is no longer in effect, so that people can get their full-time jobs back. Employers won't be incentivized to keep their workforce below 50 or keep their workers working fewer than 30 hours a week. So it's going to be a big boost for the jobs market. And Americans will feel free to buy health insurance in their own state or some other state. They're going to actually be able to make decisions and buy it any day of the year, by the way, not just when Uncle Sam holds a gun to their heads and says you must have health insurance and you have to buy it this week during the open enrollment period.
You know, and that really is what this is all about. And with what we've seen from the EPA coming out this week, you know, where they want to regulate the amount of water and time of a shower, they're going after the water. Oh, yeah. Have you heard about that?
Oh, of course. And by the way, the USDA and the Department of Health and Human Services wants to send interveners.
Yes.
Interveners to tell people how much they should eat.
Yeah, as a result of the new dietary considerations, which are based in no small part on harm to the planet. You know, and they truly believe that it is their mission to change the behavior of every single American on what they eat.
Forcefully.
Forcefully, yes, absolutely. And now you see that it's either I think it's the EPA and the FDA are now going to be set, because of Michelle Obama's school lunch law, they're going to send people out to the daycares now where it will be mandatory for those folks, be they institutional or home daycares, and I say this from an authority of having owned both, that they're going to get in the faces of the people who prepare the food and mandate whether or not it's the right thing or not. They're going to weigh the kids to see if they're obese.
Isn't that shocking? If the federal government comes in and tries to weigh my grandchildren, it's over for me. Grab the shotgun, baby.
Truly is Julius Caesar's food police. Julius Caesar sent his own enforcement agents, his own police around, looking in people's windows to make sure that they weren't eating too extravagantly.
Really?
That was the straw that broke the camel's back, and that was the end of Julius Caesar's widespread public support.
Well, getting back to King versus Burwell, because I know some of your listeners really want to know what the update is. I also listened carefully as Carvin, who's the lawyer for our plaintiffs, and Ryan discussed their predictions. And, of course, it's always hard to predict how the Supreme Court will rule. We learned that big time. But the fact is that we're still slightly optimistic. It's probably still slightly better than a 50% chance that we will win in June. And we're a little less optimistic than before we heard Justice Kennedy ask some of his questions, which seemed to focus on this so-called damage done. But nevertheless, if the Supremes decide to rule on the text of the law itself, there's no question who will win this case.
Well, the question will be, you know, once again, you're right that Kennedy is going to be the swing vote, but based on the last decision, you know, we've got Roberts sitting there that basically said, yes, the government has the ability to tax you for doing nothing as a punishment, and, you know, not a fine, but a tax for doing nothing. What's the speculation, or did they speculate as to how he's going to rule?
Well, they didn't, because the fact is Roberts said almost nothing at this oral argument, so it's impossible to speculate. That's why we're not sanguine, but we're hopeful.
Well,
now, by the way, Paul Ryan said something on this call that I've said many times when I came to New Hampshire, and I'm going to say it again today because I know New Hampshire, you were all so embroiled in this issue of the Medicaid expansion. And he reminded us that every single budget discussion occurring in Washington includes reducing that federal match, that 90% promise. Any new additions to Medicaid rolls will be paid for 90% by the federal government. He says they're already writing the language to eliminate that.
I brought that up to the people, the New Hampshire State Republican senators, who shoved this thing down, who lied to my face when they said, well, one thing, and then they actually did another. I said, look, the rumblings are already happening that you're not going to get the money. Then what are you going to do? And, well, it's free money from the feds. It's like, no, everybody at this table is a federal taxpayer. Don't lie to me. And yet that's what they did.
But, and even more important than that truth, the fact is that politicians always lie. They're going to pull the rug out from under you. You're going to enroll new people into Medicaid. It's very hard to take back an entitlement once you give it. And then you will find that the feds break their promise, and New Hampshire taxpayers are stuck with this bill, which means not enough money for roads, schools, and other things.
Roads. What? Why are you pointing at me?
Because you were just having a rant at the beginning of the program about this whole deal with the gas tax.
Oh yeah. They took this
Betsy,
bill.
you got to listen
they
to
took
Steve.
This bill. The purpose of the bill was to extend the time allowed to update your address on your registration or your license from 10 days to 30 days. By the time it hit the floor of the House, it was amended with something like 56 pages of the entire funding of the Department of Transportation and included a gas tax. Republicans did that.
And the reason...
Shame on them.
Well,
Gasperocrats did that.
Yeah, but the reason for this, Betsy, is that the current Medicaid expansion has turned out to be far more expensive than what the Republicans... described by Glenn Beck as the spine of a worm, the ethics of whores, and the integrity of pirates, as he quit the party. But I'm looking at the same thing. These guys have brought this problem upon themselves by having government do something that it probably shouldn't have done in the past. And now it's a $450 million hole just for that. So now you got this crap going on. I mean, these guys have unleashed a Pandora's box of badness and evil, and guess who's going to be on the stick for it?
Yeah. So didn't I see, Skip, somewhere a big furore because the Republicans said they wouldn't necessarily vote to extend the Medicaid expansion after the end of 2016, and Maggie the Red's all upset?
I saw that in the Betsy, you'll like this, that the Health and Human Services Committee in the New Hampshire House voted against extending Medicaid expansion, which we can fill you in later on in the vulgarities of the Republican politics here this year. But, if that happens, all bets are off. And we have a state representative in the room with us right now, Max Abramson. Max, any rumblings coming from that you could... I mean, Betsy is a national person. She'd love to be able to bring this story somewhere else.
So I had one point on the Medicaid expansion, Obamacare. More and more people are saying not just make sure that people have insurance, but the question is how many people have quality insurance, Medicare or better. And what's happening is Obama is taking Medicare and turning it into Medicaid. He's putting large numbers of people on Medicaid. They're taking private insurance plans and they're dumbing it down and reducing it to the quality of Medicaid. So the number of people with quality insurance plans is going down every year. So yes, you have insurance, but is it really going to cover you when you really need it? When you really have to have a heart operation or cancer operation?
Right. And I hear from so many young people, by the way, that they've been bamboozled into signing up for Obamacare, and then they don't realize with this $5,000 deductible, they're never going to get their money back because they may go to the doctor 2 or 3 times a year, and they're shocked to tell me that they have to pay full freight when they go to the doctor because they've got this huge deductible.
So you want to?
You know what would have been a better solution would have been to just get the federal government out of healthcare altogether, and just pass a law overturning what was it, McCarran-Ferguson Act of 1945.
Yes.
Just guarantee every private citizen the ability to buy catastrophic coverage from any provider anywhere in the country.
I so agree.
And that
And don't fool them into thinking they have something they don't have.
Right.
All right,
I think that's terrible to see. Halftime?
By the way, I'm coming up to see you on April 17th and 18th, but I hear you're not going to be there at the First in the Nation.
No, well, we may or may not be. Most of the people running that don't care for us very much, so it's
we'll talk to you a little more about that after the break. I think Steve's telling us.
Yep, we're going to take about 60 seconds. Stay on the phone. We'll be right back.
This is the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is the repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested, riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW, New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at GerardAtLarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
Singing the healthcare blues. Welcome back to GrokTALK. We have Dr. Betsy McCaughey on the phone. Skip stepped out. Mike is still here with me, and Max Abramson is, of course, with us. And Marmar Rogers is supervising, because we need that. And this is GrokTALK. Once again, check us out on Facebook and Twitter. Just look up GrokTALK, and don't forget to listen to this in past programs on the wide array of media resources we have available to you: Stitcher, iTunes, Spreaker, iHeart, TuneIn, Tumblr, YouTube, Ustream, Blip TV, and of course at granitegrok.com. So let's get back into the conversation here and see where it takes us. Somebody was going to say something before we went on break. Was somebody going to say something?
Well, we were discussing the upcoming First in the Nation event in Nashua, and I just wanted to mention that I'm coming up. I know everybody wants me to talk about health care, and I will be bringing the big bill, but most of my presentation is about Hillary.
And, that's tremendous.
What we need to know about Hillary, and I have several pieces coming out this week, one in the New York Post Monday, on the Fox website Sunday or Monday, so keep an eye peeled, Newsmax, about Hillary's fake, fraudulent claims that she is a glass ceiling breaker.
Send those to us if you would, and we'll post them up.
Good, we'll do that.
Yeah.
So, and now tell me why you're not coming, because I'm pretty excited about coming back to New Hampshire. Haven't been in a couple of months, and hope you still have the snow when I get there. We're getting plenty in Connecticut today.
Yeah. Well, again, Glenn Beck is the latest of the people who resigned from the GOP, and he has this line of the spine of a worm, the ethics of whores, and the integrity of pirates. And frankly, the establishment GOP here in New Hampshire does not like us at all, because we basically we hate everybody, but we try to hold them to account. We don't care about your words; we care about your results, and their results suck, to be perfectly honest with you.
Which is why, for example, we went after the Republicans in the Senate last year over Bradley Care, the effort to foist Medicaid expansion upon New Hampshire, which eventually succeeded with half the Republicans and all of the Democrats voting for it, which tells you who really wanted the bill.
And us refusing to toe their line has made them upset with us. And
so there are some.
I also oppose that Medicaid expansion, but just to weigh in on the other side, I'm coming because I want the nation to win. I want the Republican Party, which is the only major party alternative to the Democrats, to win. I want to be part of that winning effort.
It would be nice if they were winning, if they were living up to their promises. But you look in D.C., and we're seeing the same things here in Concord. They've made all these, what I thought were rather simple promises to be able to do, and they've weaseled out of every single one. True. And I'm seeing, and they hate the phrase that we keep using, which is there doesn't seem to be a dime's worth of difference between the two. And when you look at the results on illegal immigration, spending, I mean, you name issue after issue for which we should not even have to worry about how a Republican would vote, they're sometimes leading the issue as if they were Democrats.
Right.
You know?
But don't forget, there are some of our folks coming. Ted Cruz will be there.
And
Scott Walker will be there. We've got some people to really cheer for who are coming.
And that's true. And we just did a whole bunch of stuff with Ted Cruz, and we're looking to talk to Rick Perry and a bunch of the other what we consider more liberty and freedom folks.
Yes.
But it's the general opposition here in New Hampshire that the establishment of GOP has made it quite clear they hate the base. And at the last leadership forum that Jennifer Horn had here in New Hampshire a while ago, there was a complete absence of what I call the liberty and freedom type folks at that place. And it was apparent. And a message was sent. And it's like, it's sort of like the old Groucho Marx program. Why would I belong to a club that doesn't want me?
I'm going to try to get you to come on over and hear a few of us speak for real freedom.
You know what? We may still do that, Dr. Betsy, but there's also something else going on, and a press release came out yesterday, so now I can tell you. There is a large group of liberty and freedom folks working on a project to try and get conservative candidates through the primaries, because I don't know if you read Richard Vigory's book, Takeover, and where he says it's the primaries, stupid. If you don't get your conservative through the primaries because A, there's too many of them, or B, you're too disorganized, you're never going to get. You're never going.
They say they're not electable.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Or you're never going to get a conservative elected. So we have a project here, essentially, to present, to winnow, and to get the people, not the leadership of this group, to choose a candidate that most of them will unite behind in order to push the primary vote or to bulge it in one particular direction to get a conservative through. That so that we're not just looking at the establishment putting up one candidate and the conservatives putting up 20, which we know isn't going to work.
And the name of that group is?
The political arm that is going to hold events and caucuses is the 603 Alliance. There is a sister group called the Conservative Business League of New Hampshire, which is going to do more educational and event kind of work. But the goal is to get to a caucus in the later part of this year, certainly for presidential contenders, but if we manage to be successful, we'll be looking into assisting with state races too.
Oh, good. And tell me, aren't you having an event? Didn't you mention that you were having an event right after the First in the Nation?
Absolutely. Our kickoff event, as announced in the press release, and I'll forward you a copy, is on April 19th at the same location, so that people can stay over if they wish.
Oh, good.
And they are looking for speakers, right?
Yes, and you would certainly be invited to speak at that as a constitutionalist, if you would so wish.
Lovely.
And, of course, we'll be happy to assist with accommodations if you're staying over.
Great. Well, it sounds like a wonderful opportunity, a wonderful occasion. I can't wait to be part of it.
Okay, well that's terrific, and we'll rethink our opposition to the First in the Nation and see if they'll rethink their opposition to us.
That's right. Please do, and please come hear all the juicy details about Hillary Clinton, because when I hear her claim that she struggled up the career ladder and understands what working women are doing, please, she made it where she is on the shameful coattails of her philandering husband.
Absolutely. Theirs is indeed the unholiest of unholy alliances. They agreed to stay together to further each other's ambitions, and they've done pretty damn well at it. And now they've got all the tyrants and potentates around the world funding their lifestyle in the hope that they'll own the next president.
Yes. Well put.
I turned my mic off again because I was coughing. So, Dr. McCaughey, we had a couple minutes left, about 3 or so. Anything else you want to fill us in on real quick?
Well, yes, there are two things I'd very much like to fill you in on. One is my passion, and it's not political, although it does reflect the deep failures of big government, and that is Clostridium difficile. Almost everybody listening has been touched by this. This is the most numerous hospital infection, and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention just announced last week, 2 weeks ago, that 29,000 Americans are picking up this bug and dying from it. 29,000, right? This is double what they estimated just 3 years before. And not only were they wrong about how many people were affected, but they were wrong about what to do about it. This is caused by unclean hospitals. This is the nickname for this disease is C. diff, and you get it because you're a patient and you touch the contaminated surfaces right around your bed in your hospital room, and then you touch your lips or you touch your food and you ingest this deadly bacterium that causes C. diff. And if you come to my website, hospitalinfection.org, I can explain what to do about it. But in one sentence, here's what to do. If you're going to the hospital to visit someone you love, forget the flowers, forget the candy, bring a canister of bleach wipes and wipe all the surfaces around your loved one's bed. You could be saving their life.
Wow.
Okay, what's the other thing?
That's what they did. Well, let me just
go ahead.
on for a second.
As long as you like.
That's what they did at the Mayo Clinic. The one thing they did, they wiped the surfaces around the patient's bed once a day with a bleach wipe and reduced this infection rate by 85%. So I ask you, why isn't every hospital in the nation doing this?
We had a bill go through the New Hampshire legislature 5 or 6 years ago. The only new mandate that they came up with under that Republican majority was that every single hospital had to report its infection rate. And as soon as they had to report their infection rate, boy, their infection rates went down because they didn't want to be known as losing patients because of germs.
It's a dirty kept secret, these infection rates in hospital, but it's the fourth largest cause of death in the United States. It kills more people than AIDS, breast cancer, and auto accidents combined.
And firearms.
Can you imagine being able to eliminate this problem, almost eliminate it, just by cleaning the hospital room?
The people at Clorox are on board.
Special interests.
Really, this is so disturbing because the government is telling everyone that this is caused by overuse of antibiotics. That's simply not true. If that germ doesn't enter your body, you're never going to get C. diff no matter how many antibiotics you're on.
That's an important distinction, too, because that's a story that's been going around for a long time. All right, we got about 45 seconds left.
Right. Okay. So we've got Obamacare is on the road to extinction, depending on what the Supreme Court does, right? Hillary, don't believe her bogus claims to be breaking the glass ceiling, right? And number 3, we have to hold the line against this deal with Iran. And it appears as if even those senators who unfortunately approved Secretary John Kerry to be Secretary of State are now developing some backbone, and we will be able to stop this Iran deal.
All right, outstanding. Thank you, Dr. McCaughey, for on a moment's notice coming on the program.
Really appreciate it, and we'll touch base with you a little later, Betsy, if that's okay.
Did we lose you? Oh, we did. That's odd.
Oh, dang.
All right, well, thank you so much, Dr. McCaughey, for spending some time with us. This is GrokTALK. I'm Steve McDonald here with Skip Murphy, Mike Rogers, Max Abramson. Coming up, the Squirrel Round. Who knows what we'll talk about? Could be anything. Might even be squirrels. We'll be right back.
New Hampshire is famous for scenic drives, but they're tough to enjoy when you're on your way to the doctor. Because Obamacare limits your choices, some will have to drive more than an hour to see a doctor. What's health insurance worth if care isn't there when you need it? Jean Shaheen voted for Obamacare, putting your doctors and hospitals further out of reach. Tell Senator Shaheen, Obamacare is not working for New Hampshire.
Jean Shaheen and her allies are making false claims about her record on veterans. The truth? Shaheen refused to meet with veterans pushing for reform. She wasn't on the committee that wrote the reform legislation and refused to co-sponsor important VA reforms in the VA Management Accountability Act until after the VA scandal broke. When our veterans needed her, Jean Shaheen was AWOL. Tell Jean Shaheen to stop distorting the truth and fix the VA.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning. The Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested, riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW, New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at GerardAtLarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
This is the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is the repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Talk.
3, 2, 1.
We'd like to welcome you to another edition of GrokTALK, brought to you by New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site, GraniteGrok.com. We are your feared, extremist, right-wing, hard-charging, gun-toting, opinionated, outspoken, rabble-rousing, letter-writing, radio, microphone stomping conservatives and rational libertarians. So get ready for more news and opinion you could only get from GraniteGrok.com.
GrokTALK.
This is GrokTALk. I had to wait for Mike to stop talking. He's eating. Are you eating an apple again? Another bad apple? Yes, you are. Welcome back to GrokTALk. I'm Steve McDonald here with Skip Murphy, Mike Rogers, Max Abramson. Marmar Rogers is supervising. Everybody knows we need a chaperone, and she's it this week. We are brought to you by GraniteGrok.com and the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers, coming to you most weeks from Concord, New Hampshire, but every now and then we pack up and roll off to some other location. The show's a little bit different, but it's still a show, and we like doing it. So thank you for listening, and we appreciate that. You can donate to us at GraniteGrok.com if you'd like to help offset the cost of doing the show, since we don't earn any money doing it. But things still cost money. And now we've entered into the squirrel round. But we have some things that Max didn't get to in the first segment, so you do kind of want to visit those.
But you know what I should do while we're doing the squirrel round? I should kind of go back and say, okay, new headset, board. I should try. You know, have we run out of places to plug stuff in for electricity?
Nah, we got to have a couple more. There's lots of power strips down
Okay,
at the
well,
hardware
tell you
store.
what.
We'll just go get them.
I'm going to go into my bag of cords,
Okay.
and I'm going to see if I can get that new headset to work for Marmar.
All right. Okay, he's off.
She won't
You
talk.
will be made to care, as Eric Erickson at Red State says.
She doesn't have to talk, though. Yeah, but see, here's the thing. She can bribe me with food to turn her microphone off.
I have no food, but chili dogs afterwards.
Maybe, okay.
Chili
Hang on.
dog.
All right, so you go do your thing. Let's get back to Max.
So the real turning point was a few weeks ago. It was HB 445, defining poker as a game of skill, which was actually a pretty important game for people who like to play poker. But it was a turning point because the Jaspercrats and the Democrats kept showing about 220 votes each time, 240, to vote against every single platform Republican bill and every pro-liberty bill. And we could never break about 120, 122 votes. For the first time, the numbers posted up on the board, we were expecting 120. We had 150 state representatives break ranks and vote to redefine poker as a game of skill so that people could play it for money. Without it it's currently considered a gambling, a game
Right.
of chance
Yep.
because they expect random.
We had Kevin Bloom on to talk about it
So
last month.
Once that 150 votes came up, it was clear that probably the Republicans, maybe even a few of the Democrats, are now breaking ranks. Once they break ranks, they start doing it more and more, and we've gotten our first couple of ITLs, and one of the big ones, one of the reasons that I ran is because I've seen how DCYF, some of their officials, are abusing the position that they have, and they are meeting with children at daycares without being at audio or video recorded. And that particular state agency, which complains that they're understaffed, that they're 10 staff members short, may or may not be true. They have shown up to daycares. They take a kid aside. There's no witness there. They have a little discussion behind some closed door somewhere, and they come out and they say, "Oh, they've accused mom or dad or grandpa or grandma of physical or emotional or sexual abuse or something else, but there's no audio or video, so we don't know." don't know how that came about. So HB 330 was amended on the floor. The committee recommended ITL, and it wasn't just that it was overturned. It was overturned on a roll call by 213 to 157. Actually, I think 214 to 157. And it was amended on the floor, so they made some wording changes. Once they amended on the floor, all of a sudden there's no more party recommendation from Flanagan, who's going with the Democrats every single time. Jasper and Flanagan have been pushing the Democrat Party platform the entire time. Now all of a sudden there's no recommendation on it because it's amended. It passes. Almost every Republican in the House voted to pass this bill. So HB 380, which allows you to sign something saying you want that audio or video recorded. You want that first conversation, the audio or video recorded. So your rights as a parent have been protected. We've overcome kind of the logger jam where we found a way to do it. And it's through floor amendments. Once you have a floor amendment, there's no longer a recommendation. Unfortunately, House Bill 10, or House Resolution 10, asking the Department of Justice to re-examine the conviction of Chad Evans. Someone from the Judiciary Committee came down. The Judiciary Committee voted to ITL the measure, I think 16-0, saying they don't even want an investigation. Or they said that it was inappropriate for us to ask the Department of Justice to do anything because they're a state agency and we're just the House of Representatives. That was their argument.
Sorry.
Yes,
that's like the dumbest argument ever.
And did not the legislature create the agency, and can it not destroy it?
Yes, it can, but
you don't have any oversight.
That's the Judiciary Committee's position. And so this issue may be revisited again next year.
Everybody in justice is excited, aren't they?
Well, here's the problem. As long as that conviction stands, the presumed real killer, Jeff Marshall, the babysitter, who was the only person to be with a baby Cassidy Bortner at the time that she died. There's a tremendous amount of evidence that was kept from the jury. And there's been a tremendous amount of new evidence that's come out that has suggested that Chad Evans didn't do it, that Jeff Marshall had done it. Or she did have a congenital heart defect and there's evidence of cardiac arrest. She may have just died from, it's possible that she died from natural causes. So that was postponed indefinitely. We only managed to get about 24 votes on the floor by division to bring the issue to the floor. So we didn't even have the platform Republicans there to support us. Even more interesting, though, was HB 673, which would establish a 2.25% sales tax. It was ITL'd unanimously by Ways and Means, but we decided to pull that off the calendar and roll call it. And that turned out to be a very, very good idea. Voting for a sales tax or state income tax is kind of like the third rail in politics. Mm-hmm. So we had 13 state representatives, all Democrats, vote for the creation of a state sales tax. One of them is in my county. He's about 2 towns over, and we'll be reminding people before the next election that he did, even though he comes from Rockingham County, we'll be reminding his voters that he did vote for a state sales tax.
And what was his name?
I think it's Cahill.
Okay.
I should turn the camera towards you so people watch when you skewer yourself with that knife.
I'm using my knife going away from me.
Yeah, it's still
gonna poke your finger
right in the eye. Anyway,
there was one fee that went through. It was a $5 fee on marriage licenses, and they said, well, we haven't increased this fee in 20 or 30 years, which is always the argument for more taxes and fees. And it was, of course, to provide $40,000 a year in funding for the Domestic Violence Fund. Representative Sanborn, a platform Republican, showed up with a floor amendment to still provide the $40,000. And Democrats got up and said, where are they going to pull the $40,000 from? And so they defeated the floor amendment and then passed a $5 fee to pay for the Domestic Violence Fund. The problem is...
Why do we need a domestic violence fund run by the state?
Why can't that be done locally?
Mm-hmm. There are plenty of organizations that provide help and protection for victims of domestic violence.
This is just another case of government crowding out those formerly private and independent charities, and we've seen that since the beginning of the real progressive eras, World War II with FDR.
And companies and mutual aid societies, employers used to do this, and it used to be the expectation that if you're a responsible corporate citizen that you did your part. Now they say, well, we pay taxes. A lot of people say,
instead they go and they pay a lobbyist to go make sure their taxes get used the way they want.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, and they're minimized, and they shift. The Business Industry Association is, of course, lobbying continuously to increase spending and also reduce their tax burden, to push more of the tax burden onto John Q. Public and John Q. Retiree and take more money out of our pockets.
Now,
ironically.
I would be okay with that if these charities were then forced to open up their books to the government entities that are funding them, and where the government could have actual veto power over what they do. Because in a sense, what they've done, they've prostituted themselves. They've become whores to government for taking the money. But then they keep insisting, well, we're independent. We're seeing this in Belknap County where, oh my gosh, where our funding overall is being reduced by 5%. Hellfire, brimstone, destruction, doomsday. Let me see your books.
True. So now we're still reminding people that Governor Hassan still cut over $7 million from county nursing homes, which just puts even more economic pressure on everyone. And now she's come through with a budget after cutting that, asking for about $500 or $600 million more. I don't know the exact figure, more than the amount of revenue that we're going to have. So in order to pay for all the things that she wants to spend money on, she's not proposing enough taxes to cover it. We would have to come up with another $500 or $600 million in taxes to pay for everything. So now everyone on the left is railing against these draconian, terrible spending cuts. Well, what the three finance divisions in the House are looking at, and what the Senate is looking at, they are all increases in spending, but they are smaller increases that are small enough so that the revenue growth with the current tax structure provides enough revenue to pay for everything. So we're not even talking about tax cuts right now. We're only talking about balancing the budget with the revenues that are coming in. And these so-called draconian cuts aren't cuts at all. It's just they want a $1 billion increase in spending, and we're only getting about $400 or $500 million in new revenue in.
Well, who can blame them? I mean, it's worked very well at the national level for years. I mean, why not do it here? Why not say, okay, we propose $1 billion in more government, but we don't make that argument, and whenever anybody says we don't want to spend that much, they claim it's a cut. And that's what they've always done. So I don't know what the Republican messaging is in opposition to that. I'm sure it's horrible.
The problem is Neil Kirk has proposed, who was an O'Brien guy, but he was appointed by Jasper to chairman of a committee. And Neil Kirk, all the chairmans, are beholden to Jasper, and Jasper's beholden to Shurtleff and Buckley.
Mm-hmm.
So
could we call these Jasper's carrots?
They're Jasper-crats.
No, there was a British comedian called Jasper Carrot who was quite rude.
Okay.
These are Jasper's carrots because he's leading the Republicans his way by putting them on committees.
So, and the Democrats and rhinos are doing this all over the country. They're suddenly discovering, as the budget process goes on, that they're suddenly discovering that they have to raise taxes. Well, here's an 8-cent per gallon tax increase in this bill. The problem with that is instead of having the lowest gas tax in New England, we would have an average or above average gas tax. It would be higher than Massachusetts. And the vast majority of people in New Hampshire who are in New Hampshire buying gas in a given week, at any given time they are in another state during that week for work, for commute, going to visit friends. So instead of buying their gas here, if the gas is 3 or 4 cents a gallon more here, they'll be buying all of their gas in Massachusetts, Maine, Vermont.
Max, question. What was the budget for DOT last session? What are they trying to make it this session?
I don't have the figures. I only sat in on one finance committee hearing this week.
Could you get that for us? Because that's really what it comes down to. Because we're hearing all these, all over the news of these huge cuts to DOT where 700 employees are going to be laid off. And it really comes down to, okay, what was the actual budget last year? And what is Hassan trying to propose for DOT? Because if it's a huge amount of increase, well, then this this is a big kerfuffle over nothing.
Well, I think
so. What is it that they're actually spending the money on? Because you don't suddenly run out of money for employees that you already have, unless you granted them a ridiculous pay increase and now find that, guess what, your pot of money divided by the number of employees doesn't match the pay you promised them, or B, you actually spent the money on something else altogether, like boondoggles or unnecessary equipment.
Two things. First, I think that the reason they put the DOT budget in the way they did and tied the gas tax to it is so that people couldn't vote against the gas tax without defunding DOT. Having said that, I lost my other thought.
Well, it really comes down to...
completely vacated from my mind.
I mean, there's been no mention of that in the media, and that's really the crux of the problem, because once you know what those two numbers are, a lot of this nonsense goes away, but we come back to the whole problem of it's miserable Republican messaging.
Well, part of the argument about the whole DOT thing has to do with something regarding, first of all, pilfering funds, one-time fixes, no long-term strategy for funding DOT. There's a couple of other arguments. At the end of the day, it does come down to A, how have we been funding them and how much have we been spending, and B, how do we continue to fund them and how much is that going to cost? And whatever the difference is will tell us where we're going.
Any tax increase, I think they can depend on it being roll called. I'll call the roll call, I'll stand for the roll call, so that these quote-unquote Republicans, notice the quotation marks, these Jaspercrats, have to go home and explain how they voted for all these tax and fee increases. And as long as they know that they're going to face stiff primary opposition, and as long as they know that there are independent conservatives out there who are actually going to vote against them and vote Democrat to throw them out, they're going to be a lot less willing to push these tax increases through. They can say whatever they want. But if they know they're going to be primaried, and if they know if they win their primary, that a lot of their voters are going to, they have no loyalty to the Republican Party whatsoever, they're just going to switch over and they're going to support the Democrat. Because if you're going to get tax increases anyway, a lot of people are just like, well, hell, might as well just vote Democrat if I'm going to get tax increases.
Well, and occasionally you'll find a conservative Democrat that isn't in lockstep, as you said. Some of these, if they could break from their caucus, would actually vote with the Republicans some of the time.
All right, we're going to take a short break. No, we're not. Test. No test. He's testing. He's getting testy. We're doing something. Let me turn some of these over. You might want to do this. Try again. Test. You got nothing, Sparky. You got nothing. Nothing, Spark. All right. I called you Sparky. So what? All right. You know what we're going to do? You can do that all you want. I'm going to take a break, and we'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW, New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at GerardAtLarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
This is the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is the repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Skip is happy because he thinks he's solved something.
Maybe. Do you hear me?
I hear you.
Do you guys hear me?
I hear you.
Oh, cool. I've slaved one. I give you another board to play with.
Yay.
You're going to have to clean that off. You need that board closer.
I do. I can reach it.
Cool.
Yeah. I can turn that one off.
Yeah, hold on a second. Oh, I do see myself on the volume. Yes, it works.
Okay. All right, we can add more headsets, more people, more GrokTALK. Welcome back to GrokTALK.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more.
We need a bigger room.
We need
stadium seating.
We need a bigger budget.
Yeah, much bigger budget. Anyway, Max has 3 more bills he wants to touch on, so let's go do that.
Common Core, for folks who are following along, last month we managed to get a citizens petition on the ballot in a couple of school districts and in the Winnicott Regional School District, which covers, I think, 5 or 6 towns. Every single one of those towns, as far as I know, not only voted to reject Common Core, but they voted overwhelmingly. Winnicott's vote overall was about 3,000 votes to 2,000 votes, or what was it, 2955 to 1954. So it was a 60-40 split. So it wasn't just a little majority, it was a super majority. And that, again, so some people were complaining about the wording, and some people didn't vote on it, but they would have voted for it. So next year we'll come back.
Oh, you always hear that, though.
Well, okay. Next year we'll come back with a little bit clearer wording on these petitions.
Do you reject Common Core, yes or no?
Should we reject Common Core and demand a return to local control? We'll probably get 2/3 support on that. But we have a few Republicans who have been going along with the Democrats in support of Common Core. Now, Jeb Bush supports Common Core, and he's been getting beat up on his support of that.
Good. And he, of course, claims the 10th Amendment rights for states to have their own common cause without realizing that lets the camel's nose into the tent because the federal government's setting the standards anyway.
Right. So he's getting beat up on that, and he is no longer the favorite of some people who might have supported him. Now, Nancy Stiles and a few others have supported Common Core all along, but now that these measures have passed, as far as I know, every single school district where this was put on as a citizen petition in New Hampshire, the voters have overwhelmingly rejected Common Core all over the state. So it wasn't just Winnicott, it wasn't just out on the seacoast.
Well, it's a good issue because teachers don't like it, right? Anybody who pays any attention to education doesn't like it. Good teachers. Well, I mean, there are teachers who are so union that they'll do whatever the union tells them. And if the union has decided that it's going with Common Core because that's where their masters want them to go, that's where they're going to go. Every organization has people like that. The Republican Party is obviously full of them because they go, oh, well, leadership said we're going to do this, let's go do that. Doesn't make any sense. They don't think independently. But a lot of teachers, and my wife's a teacher, are concerned about all of the things that we talk about. Maybe not in the depth that we talk about. Maybe they're not so in tune with what smarter balanced assessment is, or what all these fancy terms are that basically mean data collection for the federal government, money tied to federal curriculum, things like that. You really boil it down to, if you support this, you lose control of your school to Washington, D.C.
And as you know, I am a union man. I've never crossed a picket line, and I never would. I stood in line for days and days and days while we had the Market Basket strike going. And, most of the Market Basket employees at the 2 Seabrook stores, they recognize me now because I was one of the guys who just stood in line and held a sign with them. But I'll tell you what, I won't do what the union officials tell me because they're not us. They're not, they don't come up through the ranks like we do. They're just... It's almost like they're appointed. They come in with their degrees from Harvard, and they're anointed by who knows who, the AFL-CIO royalty, and they just push the liberal agenda on every single issue.
And that's the problem. And they have their own agenda. It's not a workers' agenda. It's a union agenda.
Steve, you put up the post where that lady was talking about the...
Which one of these are you on?
I am now on this one.
Okay.
It's a George Soros
it works.
agenda.
Okay.
See, I thought I could do this.
You did it. Okay, anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Faster than I thought. Anyways, you put up the post where that lady was talking about the computerized testing and how it can modify behavior on Granite Rock. And that's
Anne-Marie Banfield sent me that.
Yeah, and that's another one of those deals where it takes away from local control, and it certainly takes away from the parents because you can't track what the computer is doing online. There's no way the parents can hold their teachers or their school system or their school board or anywhere else accountable because there's no audit trail that they can access in real time or after time.
It's a lot like any other issue with local control. You talk about local control at the state level, you talk about bringing the money back. It's because you can go to your state rep's house, or you can go see your state rep at work, or you can go talk to your town selectman or your school board member, and you can actually influence the debate and possibly affect policy. If you take it and you move it to Washington, D.C., now you have to fly to Washington, D.C., just you or whatever, and try to get in touch with one person out of 435 or whatever it is, and try to convince them to get the entire nation to go along with your plan. because you're concerned about your students' learning environment, okay? It's the same thing. States' rights, local control, 10th Amendment, you can't let them do it. The minute they take it away, you can go to your school board and you can talk to them till you're blue in the face. You can go talk to your supervisor, your superintendent, okay? You can talk to teachers. You can talk to counselors. You can talk to other parents. Does nothing. Nothing. They've taken all of that power away from you.
Yeah. I still bet that if the superintendent said hell no, and more than a handful of them said hell no in the state, that effectively it would be dead.
They won't, Bo, because the money will come if they say yes and they want the money.
Yeah, they don't care where the money's coming from as long as the money's coming in. And you have to realize that most of these people are not independent. They are a absolute functionary of the educational industrial complex.
And when the money stops coming in, which it eventually will, by then it's too late.
Yeah, it's like Medicaid expansion. It's the same old deal. You get used to that crack money from the federal government. The people get hooked, and how dare you take this away from me? We have become a selfish.
Then it's Greece.
We have become a selfish nation. I want money from other people for my purposes.
Right, and the school superintendents are more about growing their fiefdoms and therefore having more employees.
Especially if you're the Earl of Metzler.
Even if, when you look at it, most of the things the federal government demands and funds are A, not fully funded, and B, not necessary. If you simply said, hell no, we won't do this, you wouldn't need the money.
Yeah. Well, if you didn't let them take the money in the first place, you'd have it if you needed it. Did you have another bill? We only did two.
Designating the mastodon as
the
official state fossil, HB 113. This was widely rounded against as the most specious, irrelevant, waste of time bill. People have been laughing about it all session. Finally, it came up for a vote. The one representative who supported it, his bill, again, there were kids supporting it. He wanted to show them the process, and it was trounced. I think it only got about 60 or 70 votes on the floor. It was beaten pretty badly. But when that came up, the Mastodon bill, of course, it harkened back to memories of the Red Tail Hawk bill. Finally, there was an interesting one, HB 141, relative to rulemaking authority considering work schedules in pharmacies. Should pharmacies be allowed to work their pharmacists to tiredom and exhaustion and fatigue? And there were pro-liberty reps who were in favor of this bill because the concern was there were a few pharmacies out there running people double shifts, and it was causing some mistakes.
They can go to other companies.
They can be sued for the mistakes. The point is, if it's bad judgment on the part of the business, eventually the chicken will come home to roost without the aid of reverent right.
Did it pass?
Pharmaceutical sweatshops. I got it.
Yeah. Nicely put. Did it pass or did it get killed?
It passed, but it passed with amendment, but it did pass by voice vote.
They had me counting pills 14 hours a day.
And then they wonder why businesses don't want to come here. Businesses are tired of being functionaries of government. That's really what's going on. Am I a government flunky or not? If government controls what I can do and what I can't do or how I have to do things, then why aren't I don't even want to go there.
And part of the startup costs, when you've got the first few months, if your first 9 months while you're trying to get this new restaurant or business open, if that grows to 12 months or 15 months while you're trying to figure out all these new rules, regulations, and all these laws, that slows down the startup time, it increases your startup costs, and it results in more businesses failing and more lost jobs.
All right, Max, thank you so much for spending the day with us. We are GrokTALK. We'll be back next week from someplace, maybe here, maybe on location. We'll let you know. See ya.
Yeah, baby! When asked whether she still supports Obamacare, Senator Jeanne Shaheen said,
"Yes, I do continue to support the law. We're beginning to see some positive results."
How can Senator Shaheen say we're seeing positive results when 22,000 of our neighbors have already lost their health insurance? What's worse, the Boston Globe reports the state's only health insurance provider radically reduced the number of hospitals in their network, forcing some people to drive over an hour for lab work, even when there's a hospital within a few miles of their home. When pressed about lack of access, Shaheen said,
There are some hospitals that are not covered, unfortunately, and I certainly hope that's going to change.
Jean Shaheen promised us we could keep our doctors and our health care coverage. Now she hopes we can get to a local hospital? Call Senator Shaheen at 603-647-7500. Tell her we need more than hope. We need leadership. Paid for by Citizens for a Strong New Hampshire.
Senator Jean Shaheen said, if you like your current health plan, you can keep it. That's not true, Senator. 22,000 New Hampshire citizens have been kicked off their insurance plans. Hospitals in Rochester, Concord, and Portsmouth, they aren't allowed to provide care under the exchange. Senator, you were wrong in your comments. You should apologize for your misleading remarks. I'm calling Senator Shaheen at 750-3004 and telling her I want my doctor back. You should too.
Paid for by saberpack.org, not authorized by any candidate or candidate committee.
All of the music on this program comes to us through Creative Commons licensing from Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com. The opinions expressed on this program are those of the speakers, not necessarily those of CNHT, GrokTALK.com, or anyone else for that matter.
GrokTALK.